My name is Arbah, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a PhD theology student at the University of Cambridge. I'm pleased to welcome my guest today. Jeeves Rohilla is the CEO of the National Multifaith Youth Centre and a postgraduate student at the University of Cambridge. Previously the Deputy Head of Operations at the Faiths Forum for London, Jeeves is dedicated to advancing social justice, interfaith dialogue and inclusivity. Through his leadership, research and advocacy, he works to foster understanding and collaboration across diverse communities.
Fantastic. No, it's lovely to be here today. Before we start the interview, I just wanted to say a few words in memory of Reverend Claudette Douglas. She was the lead chaplain at SOAS. We had the pleasure of working with her. She was an absolutely fantastic person. She was so passionate and cared so much about interfaith work and working with students on campus, ensuring that they had the best experience. And we are dearly going to miss her. She is someone who I can say anyone that has come across Claudette doesn't have a bad word to say about her, because she is so amazing. So I just wanted to say a few words before the interview in her memory. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. So today we are talking about Interfaith Futures, but let's look at that a bit more specifically. My first question is, so as the CEO of the National Multifaith Youth Centre, how do you envision the role of young people in shaping interfaith futures?
Cool. So I sound like a broken record whenever I answer this question, but always I say every program for young people should be co-created by young people, and that is really important. I think when people look at the role of young people when it comes to interfaith, they think of them as beneficiaries of the programs, and that is really important. But it is also more important, more significant, that we look at young people as architects of the programs themselves and ensure that they are in the rooms where these programs are being put together. That means organizations need to be bold. They need to ensure that they are getting youth voices in those rooms, and they can do that via multiple routes, putting together a council, faith and belief council of young people, ensuring that they are part of the governance structure of these organizations, of the rooms, like I've mentioned, where these programs are put together. That is the first thing. Secondly, to tap into the passions of young people. I think that's so important. There's such an intersection between interfaith and social justice. I know Faith and Belief Forum, for example, do a lot when it comes to climate change and faith and faith's role, or the role of faiths coming together to tackle issues like climate change. And it's important that young people are involved in that process and really tap into their potential and their passion to get involved in these sort of social justice issues that they are so passionate about. For example, again, some intersections between faith and issues that aren't explored in too much detail. For example, faith and AI. How can we maximize AI in the role of faith and interfaith relations? Lastly, social media engagement and outreach. It's so important that interfaith programs remain dynamic, and that's something which has and often is the criticism of traditional interfaith programs. The saying tea and biscuit interfaith is something which I'm sure a lot of people hear, and it's that you're getting the same faces, you're getting the same conversations happen in the same rooms where interfaith engagement is going on. It's important that we use social media. It's important that we ensure that we are being creative and using technology in order to engage individuals who wouldn't traditionally be in those rooms, wouldn't traditionally be involved in interfaith engagement. So I think ensuring that young people, again, are in those rooms, co-producing the programs, latching on to the passions that they have, and using the skills which they have, being able to use social media in order to engage young people is so important.
I know you've given a few great examples of social media, climate change and AI as well. It would be great to hear some more examples of, I guess, the impactful work of young people in the National Multifaith Youth Centre. Like an example would be really great, if that's okay.
Of course, yeah. So we've got, right now we're putting together our own sort of youth committee. I mean, in terms of the impact of young people, we have had some fantastic young volunteers who have been a part of our organization. From the top of my head, we had someone called Alex Kyriakou, who was absolutely amazing. He took part, he actually chaired one of our youth roundtables last Interfaith Week. That was in partnership with the Brahma Kumaris, and he was 19 years old at the time. And you would have had no idea. He was extraordinary, exceptional, and it was because he was given the opportunity to chair one of those roundtables, and everyone after the event was just saying how impressed they were with him. So I think, like I say, the most important thing is you trust these young people, put them in positions of responsibility, and I promise you they will surprise you, as in the case of Alex.
I think there's this idea of like, or misunderstanding of like young people and engaging in interfaith work that they're not interested or anything. And it's really great to kind of hear those examples. It would be good though, I guess, in your work to see what specific challenges you find young people face in sort of fostering meaningful interfaith dialogue and collaboration within today's social and political climate.
Yeah, of course. I mean, first and foremost, it can be very emotionally draining. And that's something which young people, but also I'm sure all interfaith practitioners right now are facing, especially this past year. And it's important that you do look after yourself first and foremost. Secondly, I think you might face resistance, and a lot of people do face resistance. I think interfaith, like I say, can, if you talk about tea and biscuit interfaith, can seem a bit, I don't know, vanilla, or has done previously, but it's not. It's still very controversial. I mean, there's someone who I've spoken to recently, an academic from SOAS, who's working on interfaith marriage, and that's something that's a reality for myself in terms of my own parents. I was brought up in a household where my dad was Sikh and my mum was Hindu, and it was very, very challenging. For a lot of reasons. One being, talking from a personal perspective, what am I? Am I Sikh, or am I Hindu? Where do I fit in? I think in the traditional interfaith landscape, especially when it comes to interfaith programs, they want to label you. They want to know who you are. And it's not always that simple, especially in a more sort of globalist world, especially in a world where you're brought up with multiple identities. I think that can be really challenging. And I think sometimes young people like myself don't know where they fit. And that was one of the big reasons why we put together the National Multifaith Youth Centre, to reflect that sort of a change in identities. Secondly, like I said, it's really challenging work, and it isn't easy. And sometimes I use the words amateur interfaith. Sometimes amateur interfaith isn't what's needed. It needs to be well planned. These things need to, when you put together a program, there needs to be due diligence involved. You need to make sure that you know what you're doing when you enter these rooms, because when you're engaging with interfaith dialogue, when there are issues which are very emotional, where there's a lot of, for example, historical generational trauma attached to issues which you're engaging when it comes to interfaith dialogue, it's important that the practitioners in there know exactly what they're doing, and that cannot be taken for granted. Finally, understanding the experience of young people and ensuring that there is more research involved in that. I think it's a really unexplored space when it comes to academia, exactly how young people on university campuses, for example, faith and belief-based young people, what their experiences are on university campuses, what interfaith looks like on each individual university campus, because demographics of faith and belief-based students are different depending on the university campus that you go to, what faith and belief provisions are there. That this work, this mapping out, still needs to be done. So more research certainly needs to be explored when it comes to youth-based interfaith engagement, and that is happening right now. Again, and I'll highlight Sophie Mitchell from Faith and Belief Forum, who just put together her master's looking at youth interfaith engagement, and I had the pleasure of being part of that and recently reading it. And so there are some emerging academics who are doing that work, which is really hopeful.
I love Sophie Mitchell as well, so 100%. I agree with what you're saying. So having previously worked as Deputy Head of Operations at Faiths Forum for London, what are some key lessons you've learned about building effective interfaith partnerships?
Yeah, of course. I think for this, the first thing that comes to mind is building trust and friendships. It's so important. I think that is the bedrock of the interfaith sector. And that means just going beyond sort of program relationships, putting together a program and then saying goodbye to one another. It means, for example, if you're engaging with a Muslim colleague, whenever it's Ramadan, making sure you're, or Eid, making sure you're saying Eid Mubarak. Whenever it's a Jewish holiday and you've got a Jewish colleague, whenever it's Sukkot, saying it's so important to make sure that you are engaging with colleagues sort of outside of programs, building that relationship, building those friendships. And from there, you get effective collaboration.
Thank you for that. So looking ahead over the next 5 to 10 years, what kind of changes do you anticipate in the way public spaces, education systems, and policymaking will engage with interfaith work and social justice?
I hope for more funding, that's obvious, more infrastructure, more youth engagement, more female-led organizations, more LGBTQA plus work in the sector, ensuring it is fully inclusive. And in terms of policymakers, especially a long-term perspective and plan for interfaith and integration in the UK. I think that's really important, especially when it comes to policymakers, ministers, and governments. It seems like there is a short-term perspective, and I understand how that is the nature of working with a government. However, when it comes to an issue or issues like interfaith and integration, it is a long-term approach that is necessary.
You have sort of mentioned this already, but it would be great to sort of expand on the important role that policymakers, educators, and community leaders play in fostering interfaith dialogue and social justice. It'd be great if you could speak about that a little bit more, if that's okay.
Of course, you'll have to take each one individually. So I'm going to go for educators, and let's go for universities, for example. And one thing that we advocate for in the National Multifaith Youth Centre is university-led interfaith engagement. I think for a lot of the times, universities wait for students to speak up about sort of inclusivity needs and motivations to engage in interfaith. But I think universities really need to take a hold of that. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't co-produce with young people. That's really important. And like I've said, but I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think they can work in collaboration with each other. But I think it's important that universities take ownership of what is happening on their university campuses, and they ensure that the infrastructure is there, is in place, so when young people who have a passion for interfaith want to take up that opportunity, it is there for them. And not only that, but like I mentioned, that young people can also mold that infrastructure, those programs themselves. I think it can work in synergy with one another, and it should do. And that's what we look to do on university campuses.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just want to ask some other questions as well. So having looked at your work around gender-based violence, it would be great to ask some questions. So what have you observed about the role of interfaith collaboration in tackling gender-based violence? How can sort of diverse faith communities contribute to creating safer, more equitable spaces for all genders?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so this is regarding the work that I did with Tara Corey from Women's Interfaith Network, and we put together the Face Against Domestic Abuse program, which was a coalition of faith and belief-based communities, organizations, and leaders to raise awareness of domestic abuse within faith communities. I mean, first and foremost, and I mentioned it in terms of what I'm looking for, what I'm hoping that we see in the next 5 to 10 years in the interfaith sector, which is more female-led organizations. I mean, too often our interfaith organizations, even faith-based places of worship, for example, are male-dominated when it comes to their governance structures, their trustee boards, to ensure that these places are fully welcoming and reflect the needs of women. You need women in roles of leadership. It's a must. It has to happen. So that's something which we really were working to do, and hopefully we can continue to work to ensure that that is the case, number one. Two, I mean, just little steps, for example, in terms of tackling gender-based violence. For example, having posters of women's aid or specific faith and belief-based support in female bathrooms, in places of worship. Again, things like that, ensuring that that basic level of infrastructure is there within places of worship or faith spaces. For example, if it's a Gurdwara, ensuring the Sikh Women's Aid poster is there. If it's a synagogue, ensuring that Jewish Women's Aid poster is in these female bathrooms. I think ensuring that places of worship are implementing this type of infrastructure is really important. Also, I mean, when it comes to gender-based violence, it's tackling the taboos and stigma around it, ensuring that individuals who, unfortunately, survivors of abuse, who are victim to these sort of awful ideals, to ensure that they are supported once they come out. They feel like they can, and we try and remove the stigma and narratives around that. And that's something that we can do as an interfaith initiative, as an interfaith coalition, ensuring that all faiths and beliefs come together to make sure that we can fully support victims and survivors of domestic abuse when they come out, and shift that narrative to take away the stigma and taboo around it.
Just to expand on that, it'd be great to hear about, I guess, faith leaders in particular, or interfaith leaders in particular. So how can interfaith leaders support in this kind of educational work in preventing gender-based violence within faith communities?
I mean, I think, firstly, I'm a proponent for faith leaders being trained in signposting individuals, or even being fully trained in safeguarding support should someone be a survivor of domestic abuse and approach their faith leader. Because I think faith leaders play a really key role in places of worship, in that they are trusted by the community, and those might be the individuals who a survivor might come to disclose abuse. And we need to make sure, knowing that individual is adequately trained to deal with that. If someone does disclose that abuse to them, are they fully aware of the best practice, the procedures that they need to take in order to make sure that they are best serving their community and that survivor? And that's really, really important. And that means taking safeguarding seriously within places of worship. But also it means ensuring that all members of the place of worship are adequately safeguarding trained as well, ensuring that you have the infrastructure in place, including designated safeguarding leads, ensuring that you have designated safeguarding leads who are women, because again, if it is a woman who is a victim, a survivor of that abuse, sometimes they might feel, again, more comfortable engaging a DSL, a designated safeguarding lead, who is a woman. So ensuring that you've got women DSLs in place is very, very, very important. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you so much. And I am afraid that's all we have time for today. I just want to thank you so much for contributing, and it would be great to have the chance to continue this conversation in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.